When the Great Depression struck, trust evaporated faster than money. Banks closed without warning, savings disappeared overnight, and legal protections meant little when entire financial systems froze. Families learned quickly that survival depended on control, not promises. Walls, floors, and foundations offered something banks could not at that moment: certainty. If an item was hidden inside the home, it was still there in the morning. That simple reality reshaped how ordinary people protected what little they had left. This was not paranoia. It was adaptation. Families were responding to repeated, visible failures of institutions that had been marketed as safe for decades. Once banks began shutting their doors and government guarantees lagged behind reality, the home became the last reliable structure left standing. Between 1930 and 1933, thousands of U.S. banks failed. Depositors were often given nothing or pennies on the dollar, and many never recovered their savings. Word traveled quickly through neighborhoods, churches, and workplaces. People watched friends lose everything they had carefully saved over a lifetime. The result was a psychological shift that mattered as much as the financial one. Ownership was no longer defined by a ledger entry. Ownership meant physical possession. Families stopped thinking in terms of accounts and started thinking in terms of access. If you could not physically reach your valuables, you did not truly own them. This mindset explains why walls, attics, and crawl spaces became trusted allies. A wall did not freeze withdrawals. A floorboard did not require identification. A hidden cavity did not ask you to wait until Monday. Commercial safes existed during the Depression, but they carried risks, you know. A visible safe invited attention. If authorities seized property for unpaid taxes, debts, or foreclosures, safes were obvious targets. Thieves knew to look for them as well. Walls, by contrast, blended into daily life. They carried no signal value. Many homes built before the Depression already contained hollow spaces due to construction methods of the era. Balloon framing, plaster and lath walls, and unused chimney chases created natural voids. Families exploited these spaces quietly and without altering the appearance of the home. A wall did not advertise that it contained anything worth stealing. This practice also allowed valuables to remain dispersed. Instead of placing everything in one container, families spread items across multiple hiding spots. If one location was discovered, others might remain untouched. This decentralization mirrors modern survival principles and was learned the hard way during repeated waves of loss. Well, cash was hidden, but honestly it was not always the top priority. Gold coins, silver certificates, jewelry, and small trade goods often took precedence. These things, they retained value even when currency was unstable or just plain scarce. Paper money could be devalued or replaced in a heartbeat, but gold rings and silver coins, those could be traded discreetly for food, fuel, or even a favor when times got tough. Documents were also hidden, that's for sure. Deeds, birth certificates, military papers, and insurance documents were often sealed inside walls to protect them from fire, theft, or seizure. Losing proof of ownership or identity could mean losing land, benefits, or even employment opportunities. Families understood that survival was not only about food and warmth, it was also about maintaining legal existence, plain and simple. This practice offers a clear lesson today. Value is not just monetary, not by a long shot. It includes documents, tools, and items that preserve autonomy. Depression-era families protected what allowed them to function in society, not just what could be sold. One of the most striking things about how folks hid things during the Depression is just how rarely anybody talked about it. Kids a lot of times didn't have the faintest idea where valuables were tucked away. Neighbors, well, they sure weren't told much either. Even folks in the extended family were mostly kept in the dark. Information, it pretty much became a liability all on its own. This whole culture of silence, it really did help reduce risk. If someone got questioned by the authorities, or maybe pressured by desperate folks they knew, family members could honestly say they just didn't know where anything was kept. That kind of compartmentalization, it protected everyone involved. And honestly, that's part of the reason why every now and then folks still find hidden valuables decades later during renovations or when tearing down old places. For folks interested in survival these days, all this just goes to show how important operational security really is. A hiding spot? Well, it just loses its value the second everybody knows about it. Depression-era families understood that, plain and simple. Keeping things secret was just as crucial as having a good hiding place in the first place. A common technique involved removing a section of baseboard cutting into the plaster, placing items inside the wall cavity, and reinstalling the board without visible damage. Others used attic beams, placing items inside wrapped bundles and wedging them behind insulation or between joists. Floorboards near walls were favored because they could be lifted and replaced with minimal noise. Chimneys that were no longer in use offered another solution. Small packages could be lowered into sealed sections, unreachable without dismantling masonry. In rural homes, crawl spaces beneath floors were modified to include shallow burial points that avoided moisture and pests. What made these methods effective was not sophistication, but familiarity. Families knew their homes intimately. They understood which areas were accessed daily and which were ignored for years. They chose locations that aligned with normal wear patterns, ensuring that nothing appeared disturbed. The goal here isn't to, copy Depression-era hiding spots exactly, but to really adopt the underlying principles. Physical control still matters, redundancy still matters, discretion still matters. These days, that might mean storing critical documents in fire-resistant containers hidden in structural voids, instead of just tossing them in obvious drawers. It could also mean keeping a small reserve of cash or trade items outside of financial institutions for emergencies. For folks who are concerned with preparedness, the big lesson is to avoid single points of failure. Relying completely on digital access, centralized storage, or just visible security measures, well, that creates vulnerabilities. Depression families got by because they assumed systems could fail, and they prepared quietly for that reality. Even renters can use these ideas, legally and ethically, by using concealed furniture compartments, decoy storage mixed with less obvious locations, and by separating valuables rather than keeping them all in one spot. After federal deposit insurance was introduced, confidence in banks did improve. But, the memory of loss lingered. Many families kept on hiding valuables long after the Depression ended. Some habits just became generational. Parents taught their children to distrust institutions and to rely on having tangible control. This explains why, even today, older generations often keep cash at home or, distrust purely digital wealth. That behavior isn't outdated, it's learned resilience. It reflects lived experience, where walls proved more loyal than signatures. Understanding this shift really helps modern viewers interpret historical behavior accurately. These families, they weren't irrational. They were just responding logically to repeated betrayal by systems that failed to protect them. Studying how families use their homes as vaults, it reveals just how ordinary folks adapt under pressure. It strips away all those romanticized narratives and shows survival as a series of quiet, practical decisions. These choices, honestly, kept food on tables, protected identities, and preserved autonomy during one of the harshest economic periods in modern history. For historians, this right here offers insight into domestic architecture, social trust, and informal economies. And for survivalists, it reinforces timeless principles that stay relevant no matter how much technology changes. If this kind of grounded, no-nonsense history matters to you, make sure you subscribe to Battlefield of Survival, share this episode with others who take history seriously, and stick with us as we keep uncovering the real-world lessons hidden inside the past.